But the truth of the matter is, no matter how full your algorithm is of videos that are telling you how to improve your life, what you must do, the X method of reorganization and Y method of cleaning and therapy or self help, Delulu is the Salulu, whatever, right? The inspiration isn't coming from watching the video, it's coming from reflecting on the video that you have watched. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Sum of Everything podcast, where we discuss a little bit of a lot of topics. I'm your host, Aishwarya, and this is the second time I am sitting and recording this entire episode because the first 30-minute long recording was completely wasted because the device I'm recording on ran out of charge midway, and I realized this a few minutes into editing that it was completely unrecoverable footage. So I had prattled on for a good 30 minutes before I realized that I had to do it all over again. So, welcome to my second attempt at trying to record this episode. Um, so yes, the idea for this episode, and I'm sure you can tell from the title what it's about, came from me doing my morning pages. I was literally writing down the sentence that I'm really bored and I don't want to write this. Why do I have to do this? And that sort of got me thinking because I wasn't actually bored. I was just lazy. I didn't want to complete my 3 pages of morning journaling. But also, when was the last time I had actually allowed myself to get bored? Um, because we always have something to do. I don't know if it's from being an adult and having many responsibilities, or just the fact that we have so much to occupy us now, so much stimulation, that we have rarely allowed ourselves the time to get bored. There's no break for our nervous system to actually be in a state of rest long enough to get bored. I mean, think about it, right? Um, when was the last time you were standing in a line and you didn't whip out your phone to dive into social media? Or when was the last time you actually completed a long enough commute without some kind of entertainment, like your phone or listening to music or a podcast? We used to go on flights that were very long, or train journeys that were days long, with a tinkle or a book or a magazine. Now we ensure that there's plug points for our phones to be charged during these journeys, and then panic when there isn't. Because, oh my God, what do we do if our phone is discharged and we have nothing to do? How are we ever going to survive that, right? I mean, think back to when you were a child. I'm sure you've gone and said to your parents or any adult, like, you're really bored, right? I used to get bored all the time. I used to constantly go to my parents and say, I'm really, really bored. I'm sure all of us have done that. And I'm sure you'd remember that somebody, your parents or whoever the adult was in question, they would say, go find something else to do. The Tamil version of this is really funny. Like, in Tamil, you would say, bore adikirthe, which is uh, literally translated into English becomes boredom is hitting me. And you'd find invariably some adult who would say, Adu tiruppi, meaning hit it back. Witty, sarcastic, whatever, but just something that is made up, something that is funny, kind of. But eventually you would go and find something to do because uh, you just didn't have as much stimulation. We certainly didn't have social media or devices attached to our hands at that time. So you just, if nothing, stare into nothingness. I mean, as a kid, I used to get bored so much and get lost in my thoughts so much that there's actually a family joke about this. Around the time that I was 10 years old, my mom and my grandparents and we went curtain shopping. Rather, I accompanied them curtain shopping. And I mean, what does a 10-year-old have any opinion on patterns and colors and size and shapes of curtains, right? So they were doing their thing, shopping, and I was sitting outside the shop, right outside the shop, and lost in thought. And evidently, I was so lost in thought that the shopkeeper remarked in chaste Tamil. mm, and what he said, neither my mom nor my grandfather fully understood, but it translated into this little girl is in such deep thought. But imagine that being said in some Shakespeare in English, like it was the equivalent of that. The point of this is, I was probably staring into nothing and just, I don't know, admiring the pebbles on the pavement. I mean, what else is a 10-year-old thinking about, right? Anyway, the point is, I didn't have anything to do, so I found something to stare at and then let my imagination run wild. In fact, as a kid, if you have not stared at the patterned tiles on your floor and tried to come up with patterns in on the tiles and make faces out of it or whatever, like, have you even had a true childhood? But that's what it is. When you don't have external stimulation, the brain is going to do something to make it up, make stimulation up. The brain hates vacuum. So when it's not going to get stimulation externally, it's going to make it up. It's going to create. And this process is very interesting, because what happens when a brain is not reacting to external stimuli is that it goes into something called the default mode network. Now, you can definitely read up on this because my research is also pretty preliminary. But the default mode network is the activation of this one particular network in the brain, which comprises of three different parts of the brain, um, which is the medial prefrontal cortex, the posterior cingulate cortex, and the angular gyrus. Now, I am probably butchering the medical terms here, so please don't quote me on that and do your own research. But what I found was very interesting. When this network is activated, really cool things happen. This is when your brain starts wandering, your mind starts wandering. It starts thinking about past occurrences, it starts planning future scenarios, it goes into a self reflection mode, and it starts making connections between instances, ideas, whatever. It's basically like a massive reorganization of the brain. It's clearing it out and it's reorganizing things, right? And think about it from a perspective where you are reorganizing your closet. Sometimes some things are buried so deep you don't know they're there, or at least I forget that I have entire outfits and pieces of clothing that are buried so deep inside my closet that it's only when I do like a regular cleaning that I realize, oh, hey, I own this piece of clothing. So it's a little bit like that. Um, it's when this organization happens in the brain is when you'll realize you have epiphanies and ideas. Now, this reorganization doesn't have to be when you're sitting and meditating, right? It can happen at the most mundane things. Imagine you're driving or cycling or running or doing dishes or vacuuming the house, sweeping, mopping the house, whatever, right? You're doing something where the brain has just enough focus required to actually complete the task, but not so much that you need all your cognitive faculties to be working to ensure that the task is completed properly. And so that's when the default mode network goes into activation. An interesting example that comes to mind is there's a famous musician who has gone on record to say that some of his best ideas for melodies or for verses or lyrics or whatever have come when he was on the toilet. And my sister happens to agree that some of her ideas, best ideas, have been on the toilet. And think about it, right? You're on the toilet doing nothing except focusing on releasing. And because your entire mind is focusing on getting something out, that's when your brain allows for the churning of ideas to happen. So yeah, mundane actions lead to the brain having enough of a break from external stimuli to not respond or react to such stimuli, but go into a self-reflection mode, go into reorganization mode. But then when you think about it, in today's day and age, where do we allow our brain to have that kind of break? Um, there is this chapter that I remember from my 12th standard, which was an English chapter, which was a lesson from the English textbook. And it was a snippet of an interview of Umberto Eco. And Umberto Eco, in that, talks about this concept of interstices. Interstices being the time in between the doing of two tasks. What he says is, between the example that he gives, even in the interview, if I remember correctly, is that from the moment the journalist who is coming to his home to conduct the interview, from the moment he arrived at the location, the gate or whatever, to the moment he reached the house where the interview was being conducted, that elevator ride, that short elevator ride, is an interstice. Umberto Eco talked about it from the perspective of making those interstices count from a productivity point of view. But I want to talk about it from the perspective of having the time to do nothing, because we don't have the time to do nothing anymore. We don't allow our systems the time to do nothing. We're always on our gadgets. We're always on our phone, whether it is waiting for the elevator, you're looking at your phone. If you're taking a run or if you're driving, the radio is on. You're listening to music or you're listening to a podcast, or um, when you're cooking, you're watching TV, whatever, right? We don't allow our systems enough of a break to actually go into the default mode network, because it's not immediate. We're always chasing the next dopamine hit. We're always looking for uh, the next video that is going to give us ideas or inspiration. And but the truth of the matter is, no matter how full your algorithm is of um, videos that are telling you how to improve your life, what you must do, the X method of reorganization and Y method of cleaning and therapy, or how to better your life, self-help, Delulu is the Salulu, whatever, right? The inspiration isn't coming from watching the video. It's coming from reflecting on the video that you have watched. If you've ever thought about it, any major epiphany you've had has not come from seeing a video and being like, oh, hey, that makes so much sense and I can relate it to XYZ times of my life. It's coming in moments of quiet reflection. It's coming when you've given your brain some time to actually think and process the information that you have fed it. So, how do you allow this, right? How do you get bored? The answer is obvious. You unplug. As simple as that. You shut down all of your devices and then you just do something that does not involve constant mental stimulus. For example, today I was in a short 20-minute car ride, I decided I wouldn't look at my phone. And I was looking outside the window. There was no music playing. And I saw a squirrel. I saw the squirrel and I saw the three stripes on its back. And I thought about how legend says that Lord Ram was the one that gave the squirrel its three stripes. And that kind of led me to thinking about the Battle of Lanka and the killing of Ravan, and how there are some perspectives where Ravana is misunderstood because he was one of Lord Shiva's biggest devotees. And that kind of led to the thought of different perspectives of looking at history and how history is written by victors. You get my drift. Just following a train of thought while not being interrupted by notifications on your phone can sometimes lead to very interesting epiphanies and also reflections and realizations about yourself, what you believe in, what you hold to be true, what you don't agree with. So, unplug and try and get bored. I've talked about this before, but Julia Cameron's Artist's Way, which is a 12-week course on getting back in touch with your creativity, and I can't recommend that book enough. She has an entire week dedicated to effectively getting bored because it's a no media week. The book, which was written in the 80s, talks about a reading ban, a prohibition, and she says that that entire week you're not allowed to read anything, and I mean anything, not the newspaper, not a book, not emails from work, like not even that. Find excuses to not do stuff. That's the way she puts it. But in 2026, I would extend that to all kinds of media, right? Barely anybody reads anymore. So that would 100% mean when you're cutting stimulus, you have to cut your phone screen time, right? No watching television, no Netflix, Amazon Prime, whatever. Um, no Instagram, TikTok, WhatsApp, Facebook, whatever. No podcasts because you're still listening to people saying something and like consuming information like that. What you can do is listen to music. You can write if you want to. You can still do your morning pages. But what that does is it forces you to come up with creative solutions to spend your time, which is very interesting because if you're not attached to our phones at all points in time, we feel so lost, right? I'm sure you'd agree with me when I say that if we have an internet shutdown and Instagram goes down, everybody is in a state of panic. We all agree, we've all been there. Even if we don't want to admit it out loud, we can admit it to ourselves quietly. No one's judging. We've been there when we've had internet shutdowns or current goes out. Oh my God, what am I going to do? Right? But that week gives you a new perspective because it forces you to come up with things to do by yourself. It forces you to reach out to people, go meet people. It forces you to, I don't know, paint, draw things, listen to music. You'll end up writing a poem at the end of it. I know I did. When I did that, it was unquestionably one of the most intolerable, toughest weeks, but also at the end of it, so extremely rewarding because I came up with some of my best ideas for the podcast when I did that week. I also ended up writing poetry. I came up with ideas for a book. When you force your brain to take a step back from reacting, it starts creating. So go do that. Go get bored. Someone said necessity is the mother of invention, right? I'd like to take that a step further and say boredom is the mother of creation. because boredom facilitates creation. Your next best idea is not going to be the next reel that you watch on Instagram. It is very likely going to be in those 15 minutes of rest that you give to your brain. So go get bored and go share this episode with someone you think should get bored as well. And then tell me in the comments what you did, what ideas you had, what epiphanies you had, how that time of boredom helped you, whatever it did. Even if it did nothing, let me know. I hope you like this episode, and please keep coming back for more, and please like, comment, subscribe, share, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.